In Oregon Public Meetings Law, our meetings will now be recorded. Once the video is processed by the city's web team, it will be published on our board's webpage for public viewing. All public attendees are invited to participate in the meeting at the designated opportunities. If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, use the raise hand function on Zoom, and we will unmute your microphone for you to share. You can also use the chat feature at any time to submit a question. All right, welcome everyone. Let's get started. Okay, it looks like we have one visitor, Brian Powell, or presenter. Are there any other guests? Okay. Well, unless anybody has anything that needs to be done right away, we can move on to Brian Powell so he can give us his update on the Beaverton vision. I have you until 6:45, so if you might want to leave some time for questions, but go ahead.
Excellent. Well, first off, thank you all very much for having me and making this time in your agenda. I know all of our advisory committees have a lot to do, and so I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to what we have to say. So I'm Brian Powell. I'm the chair of the Visioning Advisory Committee for the city. And in general, what we do is sort of bifurcated between outreach years and implementation years. In outreach years, we're going out to the community, trying to learn what people want to see, what they want to see different, what needs to stay the same in order to create the community vision. And then in the implementation years, we're working with all of our community partners, whether they're parts of the city government, other governments, nonprofits, private sector businesses, neighborhood associations, all those different groups to implement the changes people want to see. So we're beginning our outreach again now. And that's why I'm here today. And I'm going to pop into the chat here the link to the community vision page. And at that page, as well as on the main page of the City of Beaverton's website, you'll see the survey that we have live right now. This survey, we're calling it our brief snapshot survey. It should take maybe 5 to 10 minutes to complete. And this is how we're kicking off the visioning and outreach process now. So as you probably are familiar, I mean, BCCI knows about getting people involved. We last did our outreach about 5 or 6 years ago, and that's how we came up with the current community vision. But in the last several years, there have been a ton of changes in our community, both very locally and also as you look across the state and across the country, we think it's time to reach out to folks again. So this survey that's very short is going to ask people about what they value in our community in terms of broad topics. We're talking about public safety generally, transportation generally, the development of a downtown generally, all of those different things with the goal of allowing us to better understand the big topic areas people care most about. And then after we're able to look at these results, we're going to go back to the community in a more focused manner, going to groups that already meet, whether those are our city groups like this one, or through other community organizations, whether they're nonprofits, charities, general interest clubs, Chamber of Commerce, all those different groups, and target them with specific issues that we have noted through this survey are important to people. So right now we're in a big push to get folks to take this survey. It's going to be live through the end of the month. And so my request of all of you is to take it yourself if you haven't already, because people serving on boards and commissions and committees really know the city, number one. But number two, to push it out to your family, your friends, other groups that you're involved with, because the more people we get participating earlier, the better and more comprehensive our community vision is going to be able to be, because we'll really be able to focus on what the community cares about. Going forward, like I said, we're going to have smaller events, some that we host, some where we're going to events that are already occurring. And we have a few focuses, but primarily what we're trying to do is make sure that we reach out to populations that we traditionally miss. And that is going to mean coming back to you all later in the process. After we get these results, I'm going to come back here. Maybe some other folks from VAC will come back with me. Maybe we can even have a joint meeting to talk about how you like to engage people, what strategies have worked for you in the past, what you want to do in the future. Because your committee really has a particular expertise that could be really helpful in this whole process. And so we want to hear from you once we get these results as to how do you go and reach people? How do you motivate people to participate? Because that's what this is all about. And as you probably have seen around the community from the last community visioning process, we've added things that are fun things like food carts and the restaurant row, but also done some very serious things like the Allen Boulevard transportation corridor and working on all those sorts of projects too. So I think this can have a lot of value for our community, and this is where we start. So I hope that you all will take the survey and push it out to your groups when you're able to. And if you have any questions about the survey itself, about what we're planning to do over the next year to 18 months, which is about how long the council said our visioning process could take, I'm happy to answer them now.
Any questions, comments? Thank you for the compliment about our outreach, but I believe it was the visioning committee that broke all kinds of records for their first outreach when this whole process began. So we look to you as well. So I think it'd be great if we could collaborate in the future. You can reach out to Lani. We're always happy to do that.
Great.
Well,
Well,
anyone else?
Unless there are any questions, I'll step out of your way and get you back to your meeting, and feel free to reach out to me independently if something comes up later too.
All right. Thank you. Good to see you.
Thank you all.
All right. Welcome if you're just joining us. Lani, it looks like Knett is here as an attendee. Can you promote her to panelist? And now we're going to move to sort of an open house about recruitment for committees and commissions. And I said I would do it for BCCI. And even if we don't have any visitors now, we're still going to, go through this because people might decide to view the recording. So just about 5 or so minutes. Please, I'm going to call on a few of you. So maybe have in the back of your mind a few positive things to say about this process. But BCCI, I think, is like the overarching best represented committee of Beaverton, because we touch all of the different areas of the city and all of the different neighborhoods. So that's why I like being on this committee. I came here from the library advisory group, library advisory board. So that was really interesting getting to have that specificity, but I really enjoy the broad scope that BCCI has. We're here to connect the neighborhoods to the city. So we have a representative from each neighborhood here, as well as some alternates and some at-large members. And so this is the main pathway of information between the city and the neighborhoods back and forth. We do quite a bit for the Voters Forum. That's our premier event. We've also had other events, non-COVID land, talking about public safety, readiness, things like that, land use. Land use is the other big prong of our committee. Terry, do you mind if I call on you to talk about land use and what function that has in BCCI? And then is Birgit here yet? Not quite. We'll go to, we're going to hit the other events subcommittee subcommittee chairs. So Terry, would you mind saying a bit?
Sure, be happy to. Well, I'll just say in general, BCCI has afforded me as a member of the West Slope neighborhood an opportunity to learn about citywide issues. And I think it's, increasingly important for kind of a fringe neighborhood like we are. And we have a couple of kind of areas that are at the fringe. And sometimes we feel a little bit abandoned, but being able to be a participant in this group makes me feel like, and our neighborhood feel like we have a real stake in what goes on in the city, and we can influence decisions that benefit our neighborhood. So that's first and foremost. And then as a representative on the land use subcommittee, the basic premise behind neighborhood formations and adherence to goal 1 of the Oregon statewide planning goals, which is to involve our community in the city's decisions. Many of those decisions come down to the uses on our land. And so being able to be an interface between the city policy development and the neighborhoods, and this, therefore this committee is a very important factor in our role generally with the city, and then particularly our ability to kind of work with the city members who've always been very open to our opinions, and working on specific projects to enhance the communication between our neighborhoods and the city, and the way the city again goes about its business. A lot of the codes and ordinances that are developed are mandated by the state a lot of times, and so they're to be able to get that garner that feedback from the neighborhood and take that back to the city to influence decisions that are made about development of codes and plans are also, that's very important. And even though we may not like everything, we know we have a voice in the development of the codes and plans that are of the city. So that's kind of what with the land use subcommittee, we kind of focus on that aspect of the city's operations. And it's been a very, I think, a very welcome, the city's been a very welcoming partner in the development of the our land use program.
Thank you, Terry. Well said. Connette, do you mind if I touch base with you about the traffic calming? And Birgit, would you mind if I called on you in a few minutes to just briefly talk about matching grants? We're just having sort of an open house, letting people get to know what our committee is about. Go ahead, Connette. You're muted, love.
Oh, sorry. I'm the representative from Highland, and to Terry's point, we were able to bring a concern we had with our neighborhood and the amount of traffic. We had 3 traffic calming projects that didn't go anywhere, and we were concerned about that. And we had the support of the BCCI, in particular Terry's land use group, to put together a work group that let us bring the information from our neighborhood and from the other NACs to the Traffic Commission, and resulting in a nice outcome of being able to change some of the policy. Very impressive to be able to do that in the time frame which we were able to do that. So I feel like the support you get, and I mean, there is so much experience in this group. There's so much of many of us that have been on Art Commission, that's Sharon, and the Voters Forum, and many of these other programs that the city has that that you can get in all one place, one shop here at the BCCI. Is that?
That's perfect. Thank you. Well said. All right, Birgit, would you mind speaking a little bit about matching grants?
Okay, sorry, I had to find my window. Okay, so first of all, we have had the pleasure of approving different kinds of projects in the neighborhoods, and the different neighborhood, the different NACs have actually proposed certain different kinds of projects like tree planting, and even the theater in the center in Beaverton by the library. So Beaverton Central was trying to do that, and I have a couple of pictures that I would like to show. But also, and we also had we had a couple of results already, but not all the results are there. So let me tell you though about the results first, and then I'm going to share pictures because that makes it easy. So for example, the theater in the park that came to Central Beaverton that I just mentioned had about 187 attendees, which seems okay in these times. And their expenses were about 8,000, and kind donation was 5,000. So I'm just rounding, or maybe almost 6,000, rounding up here. And then volunteer hours were 130. And then the rate, as a rate would be $3,710.20. And then the total match was $9,522. And they got from us $2,000. But the exciting thing about this is really that the volunteers were involved, and also the in-kind donations. Let me just show you. Oh wait, I can't. Oh yeah, share here. The green button. I always look over that one. There. Can you see it? Yeah. Or no? Yes. Okay. So that's one picture, and then the other one is this one here from the theater. So it's seems to be was well received. The other one that Central Beaverton had done in conjunction with the night market was chalk art. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And they had this flyer here. Professional chalk artists came actually to Portland, and they had 458 hours of volunteers, as a volunteer hours. So, and their volunteer hours as a rate was 13,000 and around $13,092.73. We gave them $3,000 for the matching grant from the NAC, and so that made that free, this whole thing. And we are waiting for, I mean, the thing with this particular event, we could not figure out exactly the attendees because that was in conjunction with the night market. We could just say all the night market people. Anyway, so, and then we had also the tree planting, and a variety of other really cool projects that were directly in the neighborhoods. So, and you know, our committee always looks for people to join us to bring also, you know, like we're always looking for extending our projects and helping the NACs to create something like this. Any questions or anything?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Birgit. Is there anyone that would like to speak about the voters forum or our events subcommittee quickly?
Well, I could say a few words.
Go ahead.
I wasn't able to participate this time due to some difficulties health-wise. Eric did a great job. There was some feedback that Eric got from one of the candidates. They weren't happy with the video getting back onto YouTube or getting on YouTube fairly quickly, but it got on probably as fast as it could. We did have a technical glitch in the beginning where one of the candidates, part of the opening statement was not heard. But when they put it on YouTube, even though you could not hear her, you could see what she was saying. So her words did get on there, and it was an issue of whether or not you want to redo it or not, but the attorneys and other people decided not to do it. So basically it was well done. And if they do it again, they'll make sure some of the technical issues don't involve. Now, Ellen, can I talk about some ideas coming up in the future, or do you want to do that later on?
Let's do that later on. This is just sort of supposed to be a little bit of a recruitment for people to get involved. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. We encourage all of our members to be on a different subcommittee. So right now there's events, matching grant, and land use, and others as needed like traffic calming, which is going to go a little bit dormant now that they don't have a current issue. So applications are, sorry?
Yeah, well, let me just say, if they were looking for people to, I got in a little late. If somebody wants to be on the event committee, besides the volunteer fair, which happens in the spring, because we'll need a lot of people for that, I'm suggesting, and maybe we don't talk about it now, or maybe a little later, a disaster planning section, because as you all know, if this earthquake happens, we're going to be in deep doo-doo, and the NACs could play a key role. And maybe as BCCI, we can help lead the NACs to really push their members and the local communities to prepare. Anyway, so I thought maybe that's something down the road we can talk about.
Excellent. Well within our wheelhouse. Lani put the link to apply in the chat. Applications are due October 4th. Applications for reapplying in case your term runs out are also due October 4th. So are there any questions? Lani, is there anything else you want to say about recruitment?
Yeah, I would just definitely help get the word out. You guys are our best spokespeople to share with your networks, and we're not looking for technical experts. We've got city staff for that. So I think that's one of those things. I had a great conversation with someone that was passionate about traffic calming on Friday that wanted to apply for traffic commission. And it was just great to be able to say, we don't need a traffic engineer. We've got those. So, but your passion and enthusiasm for wanting to make Beaverton a better place to live is just awesome. And especially when she shared her background, that's what we want, is people's lived experiences and having different voices at the table. And we just can't emphasize that enough. So definitely just help share this opportunity with your friends and neighbors. And if they have any questions, they're more than welcome to, I'll have a phone call or a Zoom meeting with them to help them figure out which board or commission or technical committee might be a good fit for them. But we definitely want folks to just feel welcome to be at the table, and there's just a variety. So whether it's the Housing Technical Advisory Group to the ADA Technical Committee to one of our more traditional boards and commissions, there's a variety of topics to pique anyone's interest. Nice. Oh, I see Terry and Ramona. So Terry, you want to go first?
Quick question. I did receive a note from Francisca today about reapplication, and I'm a BCCI representative from my neighborhood. So my question is, should I fill out one of those forms, even though I'm not sure my neighborhood will be nominating me because we haven't held our elections yet?
No, I think that maybe your planning commission term is up.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll check on that.
If you're a neighborhood representative, you have your local NAC elections and you're appointed at, or you're voted on at the NAC level. So that would not take part through this formal board and commission process.
Okay, that's really the clarification I was looking for. Thank you.
Sure. Ramona.
I had a question in that I had heard informally today from somebody that they have been on some board or commission, I don't know currently, and they had received a letter requesting that they resign because they did not live within the Beaverton city limits. So I needed clarification now. Has that changed since the previous administration?
No, so that doesn't sound familiar. There's those types of letters usually are coordinated in our office, and nothing has gone out today. If you are, there's some boards that have state statute, like the budget committee. If you've moved out of the city by state statute, you cannot serve on the budget committee. And there's a few other boards that have in their bylaws that you are not allowed to, like social service funding is another example. So but usually that would be routed through our office. And I'm just wondering if maybe there's, I'd have to look into that. So feel free to have them reach out to me, or you can talk to me offline, but that has not changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. So I think, Joe, are you next? It looks like, let's go with you, Joe. And
Yeah.
then Bert.
What's the deadline for applications?
Yeah, great question. It's Monday, October 4th.
Thank you.
Birgit.
Okay, I wanted to piggyback on Ramona's question because there has been a drive to not have people from outside of the city boundaries be on, for example, BCCI board, right? I mean, we only have a certain percentage that we want to have on the board, isn't that right?
Well, yes. So we have an informal guideline of, we try not to have more than 15% non-residents for our advisory boards. And the main reason is because we've got so many folks who turn away each year. And so emphasis is on, try to give as many folks a place at the table if they live in the city. Now, if there's a unique board applicant that you need that expertise, then by all means, apply for the board if you live outside the city, or if you have a business interest inside the city. There's all sorts of unique situations that help make almost every advisory board has some non-residents on there. But in general, we've staff liaisons, we stay under that 15% non-resident criteria. And that's just having some intentionality that the folks that live in the city that contribute towards a tax base have an opportunity to get on a city board. Because as you know, if you didn't know this, we truly have about nearly like 24 openings, but we average around 108 applications a year is on average. So you can imagine how many sorry you're not appointed letters go out. It's competitive. And so we just try to keep a process that's as fair and open as possible and tries to meet everyone's needs. But the most important piece is making sure that each board and commission has the right expertise at the table to be able to do the work that the board is wanting to accomplish.
Yeah, and then that also, I totally get that, but it would never, or it's not like you would actively, if somebody moves and out of the city and they are currently on the board, obviously we would not expect them to resign or anything. They stay to the end of their term and then they just apply again. And then if they are not taken.
Exactly, unless they're on a board where it's by state statute or by the law.
Right, but our board specifically, the BCCI board, would not be one of those.
Right, and we currently have one non-resident on our board. Thank you. All right, Jim and then Eric.
Okay, my question is from this same topic that came up at the quarterly leadership meeting. And that was evidently there's a letter or something from the mayor saying she does not favor people being at-large representatives, which is usually 3 years, for more than 2 terms. And that would take away quite a bit of expertise from even BCCI. And I was just looking for a little more definition of that from you. Is that pretty true? I mean, I haven't seen anything like that, but I was curious what was going on.
Sure. So great question. So one of the things that when we pulled the data of how many true vacancies we had, the mayor said, you know, if someone has served more than 2 full terms, which is 6 years, she just asked that the staff liaison provide talking points on why that person should be reappointed to the board, because she realizes that there is some historical knowledge that may be necessary or a unique skill set that would be valuable to the board. So it's not a one size fit approach, but there is an ask to be intentional about trying to make a little bit more space at the table for more people. So perhaps maybe it's time for, if someone has served more than 10 years on a board, maybe it's time to give an opportunity to either go on to another board or and to let someone else join that board if there's not a unique skill set or perspective that you're bringing. But definitely we realize that we need people on boards with historical perspectives as well as brand new people. It's not an either or, and we just can't say that enough. And that's the mayor's sentiments. But in order to help create more space for people to, so we're not constantly turning away 70 or 80 people a year, we also just had to be a little bit intentional about what does our process look like. And so that's where some of, there was that email that went out that you're referring to. And I think it's a great conversation that we're having. I think what we want you to all hear is that everyone is welcome to apply and reapply. And we want you to share why you want to be on the board and what is it that you want to bring to the board. And then it's on a case-by-case basis. But as a general rule of thumb, if you've served more than 6 years, the staff liaison, when they're making the recommendation to the mayor, will provide those justification details of why it's worth to have someone stay on that board for many years past the 2 terms.
Yeah, my concern was like the planning commission. I mean, that takes a sort of unique skill set there to even understand the code sufficiently to be on the committee, and that would be a lot different.
And that's such a great example. I think that's one that's brought up often, and definitely the mayor understands that and has had conversations with the staff liaison, and you have to have folks that know how to, that have the knowledge, and there's quite a bit of onboarding that goes that takes place for a board like that to be a planning commissioner. Terry could probably give us a few descriptions about that, of what it takes to get onboarded and to really get the lay of the land. It takes years and years of knowledge. So not a one size approach to this, but a little, what you are hearing is us trying to be a little bit more intentional and looking for ways to make sure we create more space. And I hope, maybe I'm looking for ideas too from you. You are a great feedback loop for us, is how can we say that in ways that connect what we're really trying to do in a better way, because that really is our heart of what we're trying to accomplish. And so I would love to, I'm happy to talk with any of you offline or even during this space if you've got ideas, because the last thing we want is folks to walk away saying, I don't feel valued or part of this process, because that's not our intent at all. And I don't want any volunteer to feel that way. We are such an amazing community because of your work. And it just makes me always so proud to see each board. And you saw, for those of you that have terms up, Francisca and I worked on an email that went out to all of you that have your terms up, and it really conveyed some of our appreciation for what contributions you make in the community. And we couldn't have done it without you, and everyone appreciates that. So that's what I want you to hear, not that we've got these new guidelines in that, perhaps doesn't sit right. So I'd love to hear from you offline if you've got some ideas for me, but I hope that makes sense of what our overall approach is and why we're trying to do that. We definitely, the size of our city, we're just trying to have more space for people to get involved. And when you truly look at, a little over 24 true vacancies with over 100 applicants a year, you can kind of see why we're looking at different ways to do this. Sharon.
I
I did want to allay people's doubts about serving on things like Planning Commission in particular. They do not, one does not need to be a planner or, per se. I'm probably an example of, in the 90s, somebody who was contacted by the mayor at that time to serve on Planning Commission. And as a nurse, I just kind of laughed and said, "Are you serious?" But he knew the extent to which I educated myself in land use, worked on land use issues within our NAC that at that time were pretty significant. So I just want people not to think that they're, that it's a cookie cutter thing, that people who, especially on Planning Commission or those commissions that are very more technical, that you don't have a place at the table. And I learned a lot during my 3 years on Planning Commission, but I'm no way, shape, or form a planner. So don't doubt yourself. If you have a passion for something, go for it.
That's great, Sharon. Thank you for saying that, because we can't emphasize that enough about, and I hear that about Traffic Commission as well, of folks thinking they need to be experts. I think Traffic Commission, Budget, and Planning Commission are the three boards that I hear that type of sentiment where they're a little bit nervous to apply for those board opportunities because they might not be qualified enough. And so help us get the word out that that's not the case. So let's go Eric and then Deborah.
That's Jim asked my original question, but that discussion got me thinking. Lani, do you have a sense of, on the current boards, what the mix is between new appointees and reappointees, I guess?
It does vary by each board. We have pulled the data by each board, and but it just varies. It's board dependent.
I mean, would you say it's like more than half typically are reappointed? Less?
Oh, yeah, you mean in general in a given year, like people that would reapply? Mm-hmm. In general, if you reapplied, usually you were, and that was I would say, I'm just pulling this number off the top of my head, but I would say that a significant amount of the appointments, I would say about half were reappointments, and everyone that would reapply pretty much got reappointed. And I'm making some broad statements without looking at data, but it was just kind of a rule of thumb. Like if you wanted to reapply, that you're going to get reappointed. And that's why on many boards, you actually didn't have any true vacancies. And that's why some people remained alternates for many years. Never could even get, appointed onto an at-large position because of that. So I would rather give some, that's a great question to ask, and I could look up some numbers and have that for us and email that out to you, since waiting for our next board meeting's too late. But I'm happy to give you some better numbers than me just trying to give you these in general.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah,
I thought you just picked us because we were so great, but honestly.
Well, that too. Obviously, that too. All right, Deborah.
I guess following up to what Sharon just said, I had kind of an opposite experience. So I went to the open house that was held at the food carts pre-COVID, and had an opportunity to visit with different people at different booths from different commissions. And when I stopped by the Planning Commission, and I think my interest was there because I got involved with my NAC originally because of a development land use issue. And so that was sort of my introduction to continued involvement at the NAC level, which then led to me applying for BCCI. But when I talked with the person at the Planning Commission booth, I was dissuaded because we're really looking for people who have a background in planning and land use. And so it was like, because I didn't, and I had gone to the land use forum, hosted by the BCCI. And that was what prompted me to get more involved at the city level. But then came away from that particular booth saying, I don't have the background to even apply for the Planning Commission. And having then been on BCCI and continued to be involved with my NAC, but also, social media, particularly Nextdoor, it's land use, development, and traffic that are the hot button issues in any discussion on Nextdoor about what's going on in the city, and why can't the city stop this from happening? Why can't, all of that. People don't have an understanding of the land use process, which we talked about on the subcommittee. But so I think there needs to be a consistent message on other boards and committees and things that I've been involved with. When your term is up, part of your job description then is recruiting your replacement. And that part of this is, rather than me staying on for 10 years, when my term is up, then finding somebody to replace me. And I think that's part of what our discussion is here is, go and tell people how great it is to serve on BCCI, which I'm happy to do. But I think even taking it down to a lower level of, it's hard as heck to get people involved in the NAC and to attend meetings. And, we've talked a long time about, how do we get people more interested in being involved in the NAC? And I think people feel like they don't, even if they got involved in their NAC, it doesn't make a difference. And that's why I've talked up the whole traffic commission and the traffic calming program changes, and that, hey, that started at the NAC level. Look what being involved in your NAC can do. It's not fast, it's not an overnight thing, but you can be effective at that level. So anyway, I just wanted to follow up with, what Sharon said about Planning Commission and, don't be scared away. I was scared away by what somebody from Planning Commission said to me at that open house. So.
And I do have one thing to add. The Planning Commission has an architect position, and that was the year they were filling the architect position, I believe. And so you had to be an architect. So I'm sorry that it wasn't conveyed in those details, that it had to be a specific, that's one of the unique examples of where that actually had to be an architect position filled on the Planning Commission during that that one vacant position that they had. But the great feedback for us. We always need to connect the dots better when we're talking about these volunteer opportunities. So it looks like Birgit next, and then Sharon.
Yeah, I think that was a really good idea to find a replacement. It's a super cool idea. But what also could come with that is, instead of finding the replacement at the time of when they have to apply, actually bring your replacement to the meetings, right? And now it's even easier than before. We can just invite them, and they could be here, like they do their checking out or pre-attending, because, and there's, like I did that with the BCCI board because I was very interested in what was it actually, and then I applied. But I don't think people actually are aware that this is a possibility, that they come to the meetings and get to know the board. And then I think Sharon had a similar experience with the Art Commission. So, like you really want to encourage people, though, and when you take them by their hand, in a way, because they are not used to this kind of involvement in cities, then that might be really like another approach, and we could really support that, because maybe we're all afraid, oh, now we don't have a voice, but we do, because we are mentoring now somebody. We will be mentoring somebody, and we need to work this out beyond our lifetime, right? And when I look in other cities, I don't find this. Also, I'm not sure all over Oregon, but I haven't found that many cities that have this kind of volunteer involvement. So anyway, that was my little soapbox, I guess. But
Good ideas. Thanks. Sharon.
Okay, out of respect for both Allison and Rob, who are coming up a little late, I'm going to be very brief. I just want to say I'm piggybacking on to Deb. I said I'm thinking that there's a cautionary tale in this in how messaging goes out. And I think, Lani, you already spoke to that, and that is that there was an architect position that needed to be clarified. But as far as the whole breadth of planning commission, that, that anybody can apply. To somebody else's, I don't remember who, but the onboarding, you come off and somebody comes on, you find that person. If there can be some kind of informal to formal pre-mentoring of people to give them what the experience they've had, what the vision is or the mission is or whatever of any board or commission, I think that might be very important if that person had somebody in mind. So that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. For, great questions and feedback, and to be continued. All right, Madam Chair, back to you.
All right, thank you. I think we touched some hot buttons there, and that's exactly what we want to do here. So thank you for all of your feedback and all of your opinions. We really appreciate it. So let's go over to Councilor Allison Tivnon. You have 10 minutes, so we're a little bit behind. So 7:28.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And no problem. That was a really important conversation to have. And I will try and keep my comments brief so we can get to Rob. But I will also put my email address again in the chat. So if anyone wants to follow up one-on-one after the meeting or sometime in the days to come, please do. So we have a new city councilor. And from what I understand, the swearing-in ceremony is going to take place on October 5th, which means that starting on October 5th, we will have all of the seats filled. We will have a tiebreaker, and we'll be past this time of uncertainty. So I think we're all very excited to close the door on election season and just get back to work. So there's that. We also have a council retreat that is going to be coming up at the end of the year in December. We wanted to have enough space between when the new councilor was going to get elected, which is Ashley, and between then and when a retreat would be, so they have time to catch up on things and on board with the city. It's a ton of information to learn, and you want to go into a retreat feeling like you have your head screwed on straight. So that will be December 11th, I believe. And then let's see here, a couple other things coming up in terms of meetings. We've got the THPRD joint meeting that's going to be happening at the end of October on October 26th. And that hasn't happened in over 5 years. So it's long overdue for us to have a meeting of the minds with our Parks District to talk about what that looks like in Beaverton, what the future of it is, and potential partnerships going forward and opportunities and so on. We also had the supplemental budget hearing. That will be happening in November on the 15th, tentatively, I think is the public meeting for that. So please keep your eye out for that as well. And then we've, on the fun side of things, Restaurant Week is happening right now. Please go out there if you can and support businesses. It's going on until Sunday. I've been out and tried a couple new restaurants. There are a lot of new ones and they're all great. And then another wonderful thing that's starting this week is BAM, the Beaverton Arts Mix, starts on the 1st, which is Friday. It's going to be virtual again, but there is going to be a ton of amazing artwork, amazing stuff that's going to be in the show. So support your local artists. All the proceeds go to them. The city doesn't see a dime of the sales, which is very rare for art shows. And then I think I'm going to close out. That was the last thing I had in my head to talk about. But the last thing is I want to put this link into the chat. We just had a big rainstorm and it was great to see that. It's great to see the rain come back. Our land needs it, our trees need it, we just need it. But our streets got completely overwhelmed today. There's a lot of leaves that got clogged up. So I just wanted to put that on there for you all to remember that there's a report a problem page on the city website. That's for things like we've got a clogged drain all the way to, I have a neighbor who's being really noisy. There's a whole bunch of things and there's a list of them on that page. I think you'll find it really helpful if you haven't seen it before and you might not have thought about it in a while and be like, oh yeah, I forgot that was there. So, but as of for today, if you did spot anything that needs to have Public Works go out and clean it up, that's the link to use. So with that, I wanted to leave a little bit of time in case anyone has any questions. And I'm happy to answer them, or if you want to talk with me offline, I'm happy to do that too.
All right, any questions for Allison? Go ahead, Joe.
Allison, on that GHPRD joint meeting, what do you think will be talked about? And secondly, is it open to the public?
It is open to the public. The agenda is still being crafted and it's being crafted by our city staff, our city manager, and the THPRD staff. So the electeds on both sides are going to be going in that really informed by what's happening with the boots on the ground, people that are doing the work, the staff on both sides. So I think the conversation is probably going to start with an overview of what's been happening with the Parks District through the pandemic. What's been happening in the rec centers, what's been happening with spaces that have been closed down. And then I think we're going to have like a forward-looking conversation about the pandemic, maybe talk about ways that we can utilize some of those spaces that are not being utilized as much right now. I know we've had folks that have been concerned about pricing for some of the amenities through THPRD, but then there's also a downtown parks plan that's just getting going for the city of Beaverton to talk about open space and making sure that as we're redeveloping parts of town that we are not forgetting the importance of parks and open space and trails and all of that. And we are very unique in our area that our parks district isn't within the city. And so it's easy to start kind of getting detached from each other and not having an idea of what you're doing. So it's going to be also just a chance to refresh on what we would like them to do within our city, and understanding what else they're working on. So we make sure that we understand that in the context of things take time and making sure that we're getting into their list of priorities in the way that we would like to.
If it's possible to talk about enforcement of camping. We live right next to a little park and we've had some problems with people spending nights in the park around Murray and Allen. And so I don't know if that could be part of the agenda or not, but the enforcement of that, of keeping people from camping in those parks is really important, especially for neighborhoods and some of the fear that it develops when you see people camping out in the park. So if you guys can talk about that, I think that would be good.
Okay, yeah, and I wouldn't mind reaching out to you and hearing more about that offline. Okay. If you're okay with that, please send me like a contact number, email for you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Ramona.
Allison, I wanted to follow up with what Joe had mentioned too, that as a active participant at Viva Village, which is a nonprofit for older adults here in Beaverton to allow seniors to stay in their homes as long as they wish. Anyway, some of them have expressed extreme concern and displeasure that they have seen at the THPRD. Other rec centers are open, but the LC Stir has been very slow in getting back to some sort of scheduled activities. And as well as you alluded earlier to some of the fees and the pricing, and that is keeping a lot of seniors from being able to participate. And as a constituent, I would like you to be sure to convey that to THPRD. And my thinking is that I know that the some of the executive staff at THPRD is very well paid. They're very well remunerated. And I have no doubt but what their salaries have continued as usual during the pandemic, while a lot of people who actually work with seniors as well as the rest of the public in the classes and so forth have been laid off. And so that is something that has been simmering with me, that I know that because THPRD has been claiming, well, you know, it's staffing and lack of funds and the publicity piece that Holly Thompson put out. And I thought, yeah, those salaries of those executives continued regardless. And so in the meantime, the seniors have been given short shrift as far as reasonably priced classes now that they finally started up again. So I did want you to be aware of what the thinking is and what some of the concerns and discontent has been expressed amongst people that I associate with. As
Okay.
well as I had one more question too. I noticed that the roundtable last week was canceled. And my understanding was that the city council either has a meeting of the council or they have roundtables. Now, are there times or weeks when nothing is going on?
Well, last week there wasn't a planned city council meeting because it coincided with election night, and that's just a long held tradition, I guess, that we don't have a council meeting on election night. This week we had a roundtable scheduled, but we were informed by the city manager that the two topics that we were going to discuss weren't quite ready for prime time, and they need a little bit more time to make sure that it would be a robust conversation with enough information in place for that to happen. That being said, you know, council, there's turnover, and over time you kind of forget why things are done the way they're done. And the roundtables is one where I think some of us are scratching our heads. I know myself and Councilor Hassan are like, what is the difference between a roundtable and a workshop? You know, and of course it's regular city council meetings. So we're going to have a conversation about that coming up and how to get the most use out of that. They are open to the public as well. Anytime you got the council meeting together, unless it's an executive session, which is, you know, matters of litigation or human resources stuff that is highly confidential, it is always open to the public. And also there was one other thing I completely forgot to mention. Some of you had reached out to me, and all of you, I think, are aware of the Book Corner property that was, there were plans to sell it to a developer who wanted to redevelop the block that was adjacent to our city park. And I'm very, very happy to say that after very careful consideration, the council decided not to do that. So we will be keeping that property as part of our the city held land, which we don't have a ton of in the city, but that's directly adjacent to one of our crown jewels. And the Book Corner, the Friends of the Library didn't want to go anywhere. So yeah, I'm very happy about that. If you have any questions about that one too, and how it all came to be, I'm happy to talk to you, but it really is a reflection of when residents reach out and say this shouldn't happen. We are listening, and I really appreciate the people that took the time to email or call about it.
All right, thank you, Allison. We appreciate you. Everyone else, if you have any more questions for Allison, please reach out to her via phone or email. Thank you for coming. And now we'll get to Rob. We have you scheduled for 30 minutes, so including questions, that'll take you right up to 8 o'clock. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. I will share my screen. No. Okay. Hopefully everyone can see this. I'm going to start with just a little bit of the project background, just so we can review what we covered last time. And we'll spend most of our time talking about the changes that are proposed as part of the draft preferred approach, and that will bring us to our discussion. So as many as you know, the intent of this project is to consider where and how additional housing types at a range of sizes and price levels could be allowed in residential neighborhoods. This can include single detached homes and ADUs, which we already allow in all residential areas, duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes, as well as townhomes and cottage clusters. Cottage clusters are single detached homes around a shared green space. Part of the reason, of several reasons why this project is so important, is that most of our residential land, which we can see in yellow, is reserved for the new construction of single family homes only. And then most of our multifamily housing is then in what you see the dark gold, and that's where you see a lot more rentals. And one of the reasons that we like to remind people why this is important is that if you look at where we traditionally have land that only allows single detached homes, we also have significantly wide areas. So in this map, what you can see in blue hatch, we know that these residential areas have populations that are between 76 and 89% white based on census records. We also know we're a city known for our diversity. And so when we see something like this, it should really make us think why it is. And we essentially know that single family homes are typically larger homes, they're in larger lots, and they're more expensive. And this is one of many factors that has the effect of separating people by race and income and results in present day segregation patterns. So for the last phase, which lasted, approximately 18 months, we essentially came up with 3 alternatives based on themes we heard from public engagement. And those 3 alternatives were based on maximum flexibility, the environment and open space, as well as neighborhood design context. And each of these alternatives differed based on how big a building could be, how much open space might be required, and whether or not off-street parking might be required. And something I wanted to cover again is HB 2001, House Bill 2001, which was passed in 2019. I know we've come to you before, but I think it's helpful to just think about a few bullet points. And the first is that HB 2001 requires us to allow duplexes on every lot where single family detached homes are allowed. And we have to allow triplexes, quadplexes, townhomes, and cottage clusters in every area where single family detached homes are allowed. The state does not define area, but the bottom line is it applies to most lots. Also, plexes can be attached or detached. So it could be, a triplex could be 1 building on a lot, or it could be 3 smaller detached buildings. It also addresses off-street parking requirements. And the takeaway is that it doesn't allow you to require more than 1 space per unit for a lot of these housing types. Now, I don't have additional information on that tonight, but I do want to say that this bill was passed in 2019. And I've heard recently that there are, some laws that changed recently that are starting to take a look at parking again. And it's possible that we might not be able to require parking, but we don't know yet. So that's something to keep in mind. And the last point is that the design standards and review processes must be the same for all housing types, including single-family detached homes. Right now, we don't have a lot of rules for single-family detached homes. People can mostly do what they want. But in order for this to be a fair process, so to speak, the same rules would apply to all housing types. And that's it for the review. That brings us to the draft preferred approach. So based on everything we heard from the public, as well as City Council and the Planning Commission, we took all these ideas together and we came up with an approach that centers on 3 themes: flexibility, context, and community. Flexibility essentially means promoting housing variety and supporting building designs that respond to site and climate. Context is thinking about how the site or neighborhood characteristics might affect what you require or how tall a building can be. And community is thinking of how we can use this up as an opportunity for new housing to help bring people together, perhaps require outdoor open space and promote housing design that helps neighbors get to know each other better. To make this happen, we have suggested, we've come up with 10 strategies. And I won't read them here, but we're going to walk through each one and what some of these examples might be. And I will add that the general idea is that these rules apply to housing types, but there will be cases where there are different rules for cottage clusters, townhomes, and accessory dwelling units, just by the nature of the fact that it's a very specific housing type. And before I get into each strategy, I just wanted to show you a picture of how things work now, and then show you another picture of how things could be. So in this example, we're looking at a typical neighborhood in the R7 zone where the minimum lot size is 7,000 square feet. We only allow single family homes and ADUs. And so you can see single family in blue, ADU is in orange. For parking, we require 1 parking space per single detached homes. Many often have more, but the city requires 1. On lots less than half an acre, which is almost all lots in residential neighborhoods, a property owner can remove any number of trees without a permit. That's the way it is now. And we don't have any limitations beyond setbacks and height as to what you can build. So if you're looking at this box on the left, theoretically, a person could fill out that entire box right now. That's how big a house can be. And sometimes we see houses get pretty big, but they usually don't fill out that box. And this is an example of how things could be. You're seeing now that the minimum lot size is 5,000 square feet. There is now what we call sometimes an invisible tent, which if you look at the lot on the left, that would create rules for where a building could be on a lot and how big it could be. I'll show you more detailed images of that later. You can also see there's more housing variety. Now we're allowing a triplex in this area, and we might allow it to be slightly bigger because sometimes it needs to be bigger, but not too much, just to be feasible. We take a look at parking requirements, and in some cases we might require parking, in some cases we wouldn't. And we would look at our tree planting requirements and come up with more standards for what might be required to plant and potentially try to incentivize tree preservation. So now I'm going to walk you through some of the strategies. For strategies 1 through 4, I'm going to talk about them at the same time since they all kind of relate together. But we would take the existing zoning map, which has 5 zones, and then we would reduce it to 4. R1 mostly stays the same. R2 would be the same boundary, but there would be new rules. And we would combine R4 and R5 because they're pretty similar. And then we would combine R7 and R10. We really don't have much land dedicated to R10 now. So essentially this mostly applies to R7. We would update minimum lot sizes for all housing types. And we would also slightly increase the minimum density in the proposed zones. We currently have maximum density in some areas, but state law generally prohibits maximum density being used now. So we can change the minimum, but we can't really rely on maximum. Strategy 5 is providing rules for setbacks. This is pretty straightforward because we're proposing the same rules for 3 of those zones. And that is that the front setback could be 10 feet, and then the rear setback could be 15 feet. Below, you can see an example of what this would look like with a duplex. The one on the left has a duplex with a 10-foot front setback. In the right, we're seeing a duplex with a 15-foot rear setback. Strategy 6 is to limit scale and bulk of buildings. This one can take a little bit to get through. So there's actually about 4 or 5 slides here. And I can revisit some of them if it's really not clear. But I want to start with scale. Scale controls can help new homes respond to the size and form of other homes in the area. And the definition that we use for scale is that it's the relative size of a building, such as a new home, compared to a standard, such as an existing home on an adjacent lot. So if you look at this diagram, the homes on the left are the same scale, and on the right, we're looking at an example where the 2 homes are a different scale. One way to measure scale is to focus on height. The existing code has a 35-foot height limit in some areas, and then it's 40-foot in others. And the preferred approach does not actually recommend changes to height limits. So height at this point is suggested to be the same. And now I'd like to talk about bulk controls. These help new homes respond to the size and form of other homes in the area. Bulk is the perceived mass or volume of a building based on its size and shape, and then its relationship to buildings next door or open space. And there's 2 ways that we're looking at regulating bulk, and that is the total amount of building floor area and the bulk at the front or rear of the lot. And we're using limitation called context angles, which you might have seen on the preceding slides. So I'll walk you through some examples of what FAR is, what are context angles, and then how these 2 things can work together. So FAR is essentially stands for floor area ratio, and it's a way to measure development intensity on a lot. It's the total floor area of all buildings on a lot divided by the lot area. In this conceptual diagram, you can see that if you had an FAR of 1, then a building could cover that entire lot. This is conceptual, so in this example, we're not thinking of height and setbacks. But if you wanted that building to be 2 stories, it could only be on half the lot, or if you want to be in 4 stories, it can only be a quarter of a lot. That's what the number 1.0 means in this example. So what does this look like in the real world? Well, I'm using examples from the draft preferred approach, but in what we're calling the RMB zone, which combines R4 and R5, you can see an example of what a single detached home might look like up top. And then on the bottom, the RMC, this combines R7 and R10. This is an example of what a single detached home could look like in that new zone. So the way we would be using FAR limits is to establish a base for single detached homes, allow a slightly higher volume for a duplex or a single detached home with an ADU. And if it were a triplex or quadplex, it would get another bump just to make it feasible to build these and then have reasonably sized units. Something we hear from a lot of people is that we need more family-friendly options, more multi-generational, and we want to make sure that these can support 2 to 3 bedroom units, but also have some limits on the overall bulk, so it's not too massive on the site. And that brings us to context angles. These are a way of discouraging height above 2 stories near the front or back of the lot. So earlier I mentioned that setbacks, they would be reduced slightly up front and in back. And some people are worried about taller buildings. They're worried about a loss of privacy as well as shading. So what this would allow is if a building were built up to the rear property line, for example, it could rise to 24 feet, but then it needs to taper at a 45-degree angle until it reaches 35 feet. In areas with older homes, we could apply context angles to the front and back of the lot. But in areas with newer homes, where we already have a lot of 2- and 3-story buildings, then we might only apply it to the rear portion because, like I said, buildings are already 2 or 3 stories. So I know that's a lot of technical information. Let's see how these two things work together. We have FAR limits, we have context angles. This is an example of a 5,000 square foot lot, and we're seeing what a triplex could look like. So if somebody wanted to build a 3-story triplex, they could do it, but they would have to move it. They would have to move it far from the front property line and the rear in order to avoid the context angles and just go straight up. In this example, it ends up being about 21 feet from the front property line. But if you really wanted to take advantage and then move the building to the front and maybe have a larger backyard, you could do it. But after 2 stories, you're going to have to set back that 3rd story back a distance so that it's underneath that invisible tent we have created. And then the same idea would go from the rear property line. It can rise to a certain point, and then it needs to be set back a certain distance, the 3rd story. Now, sometimes what we hear from a lot of people is, well, what does this mean for my house next door? And obviously every scenario is different. Every neighborhood and lot size are different. But let's say you live in a single detached home and there's a 5,000 square foot lot next to you. There's a lot people could do. You could add an ADU, either attached or detached. It is up to the property owner whether this qualifies as a duplex or not. It is possible in the RMC zone to also, you could make it a triplex if the lot, again, is 5,000 square feet. You still have to follow the size limitations, but you could even add a 4th unit in some cases, and it could be a quadplex. And of course, and then there are townhomes. Townhomes are generally allowed in most areas. This is also another thing that is recently been affected by changes in state law. These are different laws. It's not all the same. And when we have more information, we can of course share that update, but there could be a change to where townhomes are allowed based on the past year of legislative changes. For parking, I'm not going to review this whole table, but I'll just point out that it might not be required for single detached homes, duplex, townhomes, or ADUs. We know people often want to add it anyway, and that's their choice, but the city wouldn't require it. And then we would have standards for how many spaces would be allowed per development based on lot size. Again, the takeaway from earlier is that in many cases, it's hard to, we can't require more than one parking space per unit. And sometimes it might even be a little bit less. This is state law. Again, there was another change, so we're gonna have to take a look and see what we're really allowed to require. And to help out with feasibility, we are looking at the possibility of on-street parking credits. And so if you had a space in front next to the property line within 50 feet, perhaps then you could get a credit and one would be taken away. This concept is still in development, so we'd like to talk to a couple more transportation folks in-house, but this is where it stands today. Something we have heard from a lot of people is that open space is important, and we can't just put new housing in places without finding ways to bring people together. And so we're trying to require outdoor space, focusing on the quality of that space more than we are the quantity. And it would come down to lot size, how much is required. So for lots less than 3,000 square feet, you could have 200 square feet of open space that would be required. And if your lot were greater than 3,000, a minimum of 300 square feet, and there would be minimum dimensions for this space. For design standards, we're looking at requiring 15% of all street-facing facades to include windows or entrance doors. We're also considering limiting the combined width of all garages and outdoor spaces so that they would not be more than 50% of the street frontage. There have been a lot of people concerned about a wall of garages essentially. And so we're trying to find that balance where we help facilitate some off-street parking, but avoid that wall of garages look. And to help with keeping things more social, there would be design standards for entries. There would be 4 options, and people would be able to choose, property owners would be able to choose one of 4 options for where the entry should face. We would also look at tree preservation and potentially allow the home to be a little bit bigger if a survey tree is preserved on site. And then based on how much tree area is on the property, we would also require tree plantings based on city approved street tree lists. For ADUs, the one thing I'm going to say about this is that we're trying to support more single level living options. That's perhaps maybe the comment we hear the most. And in order to kind of keep them single level, what we're suggesting is that people could build a single level ADU 5 feet from the rear property line, but only if it's 1 story. If we do that, we're really helping people provide those single level living options. If we don't allow it, it's still going to work to build an ADU a lot, but it's more likely that it might be a 2-story ADU. Okay, I know that's a lot of content and we're running behind, so I didn't want to take too much time, but that does wrap this up. I do want to add that there is a report on our website. I can put that in the chat, and I encourage you to look at that. We're just beginning engagement now. I think this might actually be the first meeting. So if you're on our list, there will be opportunities to get involved. There's plenty of time to let us know what you think. On that note, I just have 2 questions. What issues or concerns do you have about the draft preferred approach? And do you have suggestions about how to improve an element in the draft preferred approach? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see, but I can share the screen again if we need to go back.
Okay. I see Ramona's first, and then we have Connect. Go ahead, Ramona.
Thanks, Rob. I needed clarification on what you had said prior to the formal presentation. As far as the size of the lot, currently you said that there is no limit to the number of trees that can be removed. What was the size of the lot currently?
1/2 acre.
1/2 acre. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the R7 zone has a 7,000 square foot minimum lot size. 1/2 acre is about 22,000 square feet.
Okay.
That's very large.
All right, go ahead, Connect.
I had asked at the last time you came about charging stations and how those would be handled to encourage electric cars and that sort of thing, if we're going more to an off-street and non-garage parking. And also, so our main strategy for, I'm still concerned, I think this is, there's some really nice developments with these changes that you have, but I'm still concerned about the mobility issues for seniors.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that the ADU and is the only suggestion for a single level? Or are there still other options that you'll be promoting?
A lot of the ADA stuff comes down to the building form, and thankfully I actually met with our building team today, but it really depends upon how many floors it is and whether they're on top of each other or they're side by side. So if we allow more of these housing types on smaller lots, in many cases, they will be stacked on top of each other, not side by side. And there will be scenarios where the ground floor units have to be accessible. So if we can encourage more development like that, we can maintain, we can try to make more ground floor units that are single level. I asked them a lot about elevators, like what does it take to get an elevator in a building? And what I hear is that it's quite expensive. And so people will try to reconfigure the building to kind of avoid that. So I don't want to promise that people are going to see taller buildings with elevators. That might not happen with this. But I do think with more of the stacked plexes and the ADUs, and in some cases cottage clusters, then you could have more single level living options. And it would come down with what the property owner developer wants to build, but there's more flexibility. Another thing I would like to add about that is we focus the conversation a lot on housing types, and something we've been trying to think about lately are how are setbacks limiting single level living options? Because sometimes we kind of push the building into the center and then it has to go up. And so now we have reduced setbacks, and essentially buildings can spread out a little bit more. And so we've made it easier to fit perhaps at least an extra bedroom on the lower level of some housing types. And so I think those reduced setbacks could help things like single family homes and duplexes put more important living functions on the lower level.
Okay, and but not and then what about something like a split half, I think they call them?
A split half, I'm not, do you mean like a side-by-side home or something different?
It's a tri-level type of an option, but it has.
I'm not sure if I can picture.
That's okay.
Okay.
We'll
you can send use my email.
And about the charging stations?
So we are working with our parking folks on that to figure out how this would affect it. We do want to facilitate that for sure. And climate concerns, they've been a big part of the project. That's a lot of where the flexibility comes in. There is a state law. I feel like I keep talking about state law all the time. These are all different laws, but there is one that would require EV parking for housing with 5 or more units. So the city would be required to kind of make that work. In this scenario, it's usually cottage clusters that have 5 units. The EV requirements might apply more to housing types with more than 5 units. It doesn't mean we can't work to make sure we're supporting the infrastructure, but that is something we'd like to do.
All right, we'll take these last 2 comments. First, Joe, and then Deborah. Go ahead, Joe.
All right, thanks. Can you tell me, you talk about the triplexes and duplexes. First of all, where are they going to be built? Are they going to be built on existing empty lots, or are there going to be single family dwelling homes that will be sold, destroyed, and then the duplexes and triplexes come up? So essentially, where is the land going to come from to build all of these triplexes, duplexes?
Well, ultimately, either scenario could happen. It's up to a property owner for the most part to decide, as long as a site meets the minimum lot size and some other development characteristics. It could either be a demolition and replacement, or it could be a vacant lot. We don't have a lot of vacant lots. Something we don't talk about as much, just given time limitations, is that when we did work with our economic consultant, we found that these housing types are still quite expensive to build, and it's just not feasible to tear down a single family home and replace it with a triplex. People would just lose money. So I don't think we can expect at this stage, given development costs and everything associated with that, that there would be a lot. But right now, the bottom line is it's still really expensive to build these housing types. And sometimes it's cheaper for developers to just build a larger single family home and sell it for the same cost that they could sell for a triplex. We also interviewed a lot of developers who are a little worried about the risk with building a new type. Everyone knows that the single family product, they're a little worried about triplexes. And so to answer your question, I mean, yes, it could happen, but there's a lot of hesitation and it's quite expensive.
So do you have any idea down the road, like what kind of percentage of triplexes, duplexes might be built? You're talking 20%, 5%, 0%, 1%?
I think it's hard to tell now, but I do know when the state was looking at this and they were trying to anticipate how much development could come from it, the number they used for, I think generally for middle housing was a 3% increase. But a lot of people are thinking now that that's too high because it's still so expensive to build. They're just not seeing quite as much. I couldn't tell you what would happen in 10 or 20 years. We really don't have that information now, but that was the number they were using in 2019.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, go ahead, Deb, and then we'll move on.
So 2 questions. The whole single family and then an ADU built, is the one parking space rule, or you're considering the ADU is not a separate living unit, so it wouldn't require its own parking space?
Actually, yeah, that is a state law says we can't require parking for ADUs.
Okay. And then the second thing, I'm having trouble picturing what the size of a piece of property that a cottage cluster would be on. Like, okay. I like envisioning a cottage cluster on a 7,000, even a 10,000 foot lot. So are there any existing cottage clusters, not only in Beaverton, but in Washington County? And what does that look like?
There aren't, well, I can't speak for Washington County, and I don't think there is one in Beaverton, but there are examples of cottage clusters in Oregon, and there's some nice graphics that I could share with BCCI so you can see what it would look like.
I'm just curious as to what this, like in talking about available property, right? Yeah. Like if I'm a developer and I'm looking to buy property and I want to build a cottage cluster, what size am I looking, like, am I buying somebody's farm and developing it? And, assuming that that property is within the urban growth boundary and all of that. And like, in terms of development at Cooper Mountain, are any of the developers looking at cottage cluster type building at Cooper Mountain instead of multifamily housing or single family homes on tiny little lots?
Sure. Well, I think there's 2 answers to that. I'll focus more on what's inside the city limits and not Cooper Mountain. But the minimum lot size is 7,000 square feet for a cottage cluster. That is determined by the state. It's actually quite small. And my background's in architecture. I have been modeling these cottage clusters, and I'll be honest, it's really hard to make it work. Frankly, we have to allow it because that's the requirement. I think they'd be better off on a 9,000 or 10,000 square foot lot, but we have to allow 7,000 square foot, and the cottages would be very small, but it's possible. But I can show you, there's an online PDF that shows some great examples of cottage clusters with the development information. I can share that with BCCI. Oh, and Cooper Mountain. Cooper Mountain is actually going to have slightly different rules. So I work with Casera Phipps a lot on those rules. They are looking at cottage clusters. But there could be different standards for the development in Cooper. I'm not on that project team, so I can't really tell you what they are, but there could be different rules for what's inside city limits and then what we're going to do for Cooper.
Okay, because some of it is not inside the city limit, but if they build stuff that doesn't fit into these new city rules, and then that housing eventually comes into the city, do they get grandfathered in?
They would be grandfathered in, but Washington County has to comply with House Bill 2001. And so they're going to have to allow 7,000 square foot lot cottage clusters.
All right, any other questions can go to Rob's email. Thank you so much for your presentation. We appreciate it.
Sure, it's a lot of information, so please reach out if you've had time to digest it and you just have more questions.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's go to the consent agenda. Or the August minutes, sorry about that. Are there any amendments to the August minutes? No amendments. Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes as written? Thank you, Joe. Is there a second?
I'll second.
I saw Gary.
Okay.
Okay, I saw a few of those. All those in favor of approving the August minutes as written, raise your hand. Motion passes. Thank you very much. All right, now let's move to the city update. Lani?
Yes, I'll keep this short and sweet. Just a couple things about a couple of resources for COVID. Sorry about
Lani,
that.
you got me.
All right, so just two quick updates. One is on the, I'm going to put in the chat a few additional resources on where you can get additional information on help for COVID-19 resources. And I'm just entering that in there right now, but there's where you can go to Washington County's website for vaccine information, testing site, as well as just general information that is uploaded on a regular basis at the county. And then as well, we included our city's link for information about getting city resources that are available. And I think most of you are aware, but the statewide mask requirement is in place for those age 5 and older. And if you're outdoors in a public setting and you can't maintain a 6-foot distance, just asking folks to wear a mask during that time as well. And I think that about wraps that piece up. And then the second area I wanted to give an update was on our bylaws. So just we're shooting to hoping that the bylaws for multiple boards will be on the consent agenda at City Council meeting, probably the October 19th meeting or around there. And as you will recall, we had a BCCI subcommittee group that worked on the bylaws, and the elections of officers was one of the sections that was streamlined. And so when those are formally approved by City Council, we'll be able to use our updated language, and our officer elections would then take place in December. And it's a very simplified process. And the officer positions would be chair, vice chair, treasurer, and recorder, which that hasn't changed. So, so stay tuned on that. I'll send you an email once those are adopted at the City Council meeting, hopefully before our October board meeting. Any questions for me or anything that you need follow up on? I'll leave my email address and my phone number so you can reach me offline if you'd like. Thanks. And apologies about my camera. Thanks.
All right. Okay, now let's go into subcommittee updates. Eric, moderator Eric is not here tonight, so he can't sort of give his rundown of the voters forum. So I have some notes from Lani. We did a great deal of outreach. We did on the city website, a newspaper, we had Spanish radio ads, the citywide postcard, your city, and then Vintu did an awesome promo video. It was the first hybrid event coordinated by the city, so we were breaking new ground there. We didn't have any sort of processes or rules or expectations, so we had to create it all from scratch, and it went really amazingly well. Let's see. We had TV. We had, our TV company who was there on site in a separate area who was coordinating. It was really smooth. We had one little hiccup at the very beginning, but we had a great deal of questions from the community and some really interesting questions that we had never had before. And so we got a really great response from both candidates. We had a really great viewing. We had quite a few inquiries about where to view it, and CTV did a great job in turning it around over the weekend, and we got it posted on Monday. Overall, I think it was probably one of the best ones we've ever had, because these two candidates were so close in the poll earlier this year, and again, we're so close in the polling this fall, that this event did a really good job of teasing out their differences, because they were both such excellent candidates. So, Joe, do you have anything more to say, or do we have any questions about the voters forum? Okay. Joe, did you want to say anything else about, or is he still with us?
Say that again, please.
Did you have anything else to say about the voters forum, or anything else to say about any future events you wanted to bring up?
Well, yeah, as I mentioned before, besides the volunteer fair, assuming that maybe by springtime we'll be able to do it in person, but I guess January, February, we can discuss that. The other is the disaster planning that I think it would be good for us as leaders in the NAC community to urge the NAC members, and maybe we can provide some leadership in helping the NAC give programs about the disaster planning. I mean, the city of Beaverton is doing a great job. I think we got to get down on a local level and make it really crystal clear that people must save water, a gallon per day per person, 2-week minimum, which is a lot, but once this disaster happens, and hopefully it won't be for a long time, but it could be tomorrow, that planning people do today is going to help tremendously. And, within 8 to 10 hours, safely will be totally gone with food. So people really have to understand that if this 9 point on the Richter scale happens, we're in big trouble, and we're not going to have any help from utilities for sometimes months. So we'll be on our own for at least 2 weeks before some of the centers open up, according to what I heard from some of the people in the city. So I hope we can think about that, and maybe in the next meeting, talk about it and how we can maybe help the NAC people get the word out.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see, I see your hand up from Birgit. Go ahead. Yeah, I just wanted to suggest that we do something else than what we always do. Like that, we did that already. We did, like voters forum now several times. I would suggest we are looking at some event that actually is maybe in conjunction with another commission or board that that we could work together. For example, sustainability. I'm gonna bring that up every time, but anything in that area, that would actually be maybe another event that we could pull that new board in and get to know them, and maybe bring something like that also to BCCI, new kind of ideas. I know that also was done, like, I think before I was part of BCCI. I'm sure it was before because I've never seen it. But yet again, disaster planning and so on,
we did that already. And so, and just kind of like 2 years ago, I thought, or three, maybe, yeah, 3 years ago. So anyway, just a food for thought about events, creating something really in a different area that also really needs to go in our vision. I mean, like it has to fit in our vision, but I think if we also connect to other boards, that would be really nice.
Thank you. And Lani just posted in the chat, Living Greener summits were before the Emergency Preparedness Summit, and that was pre-COVID.
Well, that was a long time ago before I was there.
It was.
Like, geez, 7 years.
All right, does anyone have any other ideas for events or anything, any questions or comments about the Voters Forum? All right, I just wanted to, oh, sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Yes, I have been trying to find a cheap place to get shredding done. And the city, as you know, is not going to do it any longer. But back in the day, we did that wonderful recycling event. And I was wondering if we, BCCI, couldn't start doing a shredding event. I'm planning on using Hillsborough's event in first week in November, but I don't know if that's fair or not, but I will just smile and say, and from Hillsborough. So I just like to suggest that.
I know some of the NACs have been hosting shredding events. Is there anyone here who NAC has hosted a shredding event? Connect, do you want to say a few words?
I don't have a microphone.
We can hear you. You're good.
Oh, you can? Oh, it just said muted. Yeah, we had a residents that were looking for a shredding event. It was shortly after last fall, actually, I guess, shortly after the police had, because of the pandemic, discontinued their events. And I think it's a really good multi-NAC event, maybe a BCCI event, because we didn't fill the truck up, and it does
called me.
Yeah, right. And we had 76 cars lined up ready to go before we even started taking the shredding materials. So, and we did I think there's another NAC that's looking at it already as well.
South Beaverton is talking about doing one.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about it in 5 Oaks, Triple Creek as well.
So get a centralized location and let everybody know. We sent out a mailer. It didn't take a lot of volunteers. It would be a great BCCI event, I think, if we wanted to expand.
I can see us having a role in sort of combining NACs geographically and helping the NACs organize one. So great ideas, Karen and Connect. Thank you. All right, Gary, did you have a question or comment? You're muted. We can't hear you. Sorry, we still can't hear you.
I don't think
we could hear you for a second there. Nope, just for a second. Do that again. Yes, go ahead.
Now, good. South Beaverton is doing some of the preparatory work for a NAC or for a shredding event, and I'll be talking to the chair here in the next week or so. And I think they would probably show some interest.
Excellent. Well, thank you for bringing that up, Karen. It sounds like it's a need in the community and the NACs are rising to the challenge. Okay, anything else for events? Okay, go ahead, Annette.
We just finished, the Highland neighborhood just finished a back to school safety, traffic safety program that we did in conjunction with our elementary school that is in our neighborhood and with an ODOT program called Safe Routes to School. We sent emails and mailers out to the neighborhood reminding people that students would be back on the streets. We distributed about 50 yard signs that were supplied by Safe Routes to School, reminding drivers to be careful. And on the first 2 days of school, we had greeters on the streets with our signs, reminding people that the students were there. This is going to be followed up in February with what the ODOT people call a map walk. It will, people will walk the routes of school to make sure signs are visible, that there aren't any hazards that we should be aware of. Maybe that you have school zones in the appropriate places. And we had 9 greeters and I think about 3,000 mailers went out. And as I said, the 50 yard sign. So I think there's another, I think Central's interested in doing similar thing with Safe Routes too.
Excellent. So there's an opportunity next for something in February. Maybe we could do together. I'm sure Connect would be willing to.
I've got plenty of signs.
Good call. Any other events, questions, comments, ideas? Been really productive. Connect, is there anything, any traffic calming updates you have?
Oh, yes. I was hoping to be able to tell you that we had passed the voting change for the traffic calming project, but they didn't have a forum, so we'll have to wait till October before that happens. We are also looking to have references and reporting of non-returned ballots being included in the no vote tally as to discontinue that process. It was kind of misleading, although it doesn't actually change the outcome of the vote. It just makes it seem like it was a lot closer than maybe it was. And then there were the 5 focus areas that we got from the neighborhood associations about solutions and areas that they thought could make improvements. 2 of them are being worked on, the ones that related to changing the balloting materials and updating the website. There's work already being done on those. There's been discussion with Jabra about working on the idea of looking at hotspots. There was concern that after these very intensive projects have failed and we've proven that there's a problem and all of that, that there remains a safety issue. And the thought was, could we not just work on maybe some of the hotspots instead of an entire street? So that will be looked at. On hold right now, and maybe Allison can help us with this, is whether what to, as far as comments about incorporating concern for neighborhood pass-through, neighborhood traffic impact of different city developments and things like that, and to provide financial support for other than speed bumps, for the more higher level mitigation, like traffic circles and things like that. That will, there's a lot going on right now in city, so we'll find that a different time for that agenda.
Great, thank you for the update. Any questions about traffic, comments for tonight?
Just to pop in to answer to that, you can always reach out to the city council, the mayor, and the city manager. Right now, we're kind of looking to the city manager to fill us in on the best way for us to route resident feedback to different departments, because sometimes we don't have the answer and we need to learn alongside you. This is an area where I'm still building up my IQ, but I'll look into it and we can connect on that, and I can bring some information back next month.
Okay, I'll send you my contact information, or you can contact Lani.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So I know, Birgit, you already did a bit of the matching grant review. Do you have anything else to add? Or does anyone have any questions or suggestions? No? Okay. Was there any land use, Terry? Any updates for your subcommittee?
Just that I heard from Miles that they have sent the new web information to the community development department, and they're kind of doing a little review to make sure we've accurately portrayed the land use system. So we are pending a review. There may be some changes, and then we do need to think about other ways of communicating some of our more difficult land use topics, and considering something more engaging like videos. And maybe we can have Bintu do a video on how to submit a land use action, since she's such a great web presence, video presence. So anyway, think about topics, land use committee, think about topics that you think would be useful to communicate in kind of a different way that we could attach to our website to make it a little more interactive and fun. That's it.
All right, any questions about that? Hey, now we've sort of been doing it all meeting, which is really excellent, but we had some time here for NAC round robin. So is there anyone we haven't heard from, has any news or any questions or comments about their neighborhood that they want to share? This is the time for it. I see Sharon's hand went up. Go ahead, Sharon.
So at the quarterly leadership meeting, there was a lot of discussion about a lot of things, and collaboration came up at the end about having synergy between NACs so that we don't have so many silos doing similar things. But if we came together, so I talked to Reggie and maybe Kate Arnold, and so Sexton Mountain NAC, Highland NAC, and West Beaverton NACs will possibly, hopefully get together, and I'm going to send out an email to people within those to do some brainstorming around traffic, around emergency preparedness, around sustainability. So those topics, I know that I've got a list of about maybe 6, 7, 8 people who I'm hoping that I'll get together at Murray Hill Cafe when the rain stops outdoors, and do some brainstorming around doing collaboration between NACs in these 3 arenas.
That's been the theme of the evening, hasn't it? So bravo, well done.
Could you repeat those 3? Sorry.
Sharon, can you repeat those
sorry.
3 areas?
Yeah, repeat those 3 areas.
Oh, sure. Sexton Mountain NAC, of which I'm the chair, Highland, of which there was Reggie and Canette, and West Beaverton, which is Kate Arnold.
So what are we going to discuss? The topics we're going to talk about.
Brainstorming about emergency preparedness, possibly traffic, and also, God, what was the other one I just mentioned?
Sustainability.
Thank you. Sustainability, trees, yeah, all that kind of stuff. Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
Excellent. Is there anyone else who has any news of their NAC to share? I know we don't have a lot of time for it this evening because we got carried away with other things, but thank you throughout the meeting with your updates and ideas and questions. So if anyone has anything for next month that they think of between now and then, we'll definitely make time for it then. So all that remains, unless anyone has any other questions or comments, is to go back to Sharon for some actionable items before we sign off.
Good grief, I can barely read my writing. Okay. So the first thing is that the Visioning Advisory Committee, the survey winds up at the end of the month. Please ask others to participate. Think about engagement strategies. Take the survey yourself. Number 2 is applications for boards and commissions are due by Monday, October 4th, and that includes re-ups. Spread the word and spread the passion. There are 24 openings currently, so go for it. Number 3, Allison had a very full reporting, which included the supplemental budget, THPRD joint meeting, which is open to the public. Restaurant week, I'm going to go out after this meeting and eat my top Burmese that is cold in the kitchen that I got from Restaurant Week tonight. BAM is online and self-promotion. One of my glass art pieces is in it. Report a problem link is in, I believe, Allison, that you put it in to the chat. Joe had mentioned something about THPRD issues of camping. I believe there is a THPRD patrol, security patrol, and they have a separate number. Elsie Stir, I believe that somebody, Ramona, I think, had mentioned, and as somebody who has been laid off from there, I know that that's a vulnerable population with a slow roll of opening. So they have already opened for fitness, but classes will not open until after January. The Book Corner property will be kept as city-held land, and that's awesome. Rob did a really great presentation for the HOP, and I had flashbacks personally about my time on Planning Commission with FARs and setbacks and variances and all that good stuff. But please, any issues, any concerns, how to improve the process, please email Rob on that front. The breakout for the subcommittees, events, looking for things like emergency preparedness, voters forum. It's really what the public wants, not what we want. And collaboration for sustainability, emergency planning, shredding, all great ideas. So keep them coming and have that synergy. Traffic calming, there was no traffic commission quorum, working on hotspots, cut through traffic issues, alternatives to speed bumps, reach out to the city council, the mayor, and the city manager, as Allison had mentioned. You know what? I think that's it. I think that's it. So.
That's impressive.
I feel like the guy that does I feel like the guy at the end of the commercial that does the speed talking.
BCCI terms and conditions. All right. Is there any other questions or comments before we end the meeting? Thank you all so much for sticking around. It's been an honor. I think this is one of the best meetings we've ever had. Thank you all so much for the participation, and I will see you next month. Good night, all. Happy Top Burmese, Sharon.
Yes.
Everybody.
The temptation is too much for Top Burmese.